Welcome to the conversation. I'm Paul Grondahl, the director of the New York State Writers Institute, and I'm very excited about our guest today, William Kennedy, the founder of the New York State Writers Institute, executive director, my mentor, and a great American novelist. Thanks for coming on the conversation, Bill. Cheers. What are you drinking here tonight?
I'm drinking a little red wine, as what I usually drink, and this is Cote du Rhone, which is what I usually drink, but I also drink a little Rioja, and I drink a little Malbec. I like them all, and some Cabernet once in a while. And this is my favorite. This Cote du Rhone.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of good Cote du Rhone, table wine, and it's great. I just finally focused on that, and my palate agrees with me.
It's a good choice. I'm drinking an inexpensive Italian table red, but I will remind you, when I came to Albany in 1981, you were the first person I met on that campus, the University of Albany. I was coming for graduate school.
I remember that story.
I thought a great wine was Mateus or Blue Nun. I drink bad white.
I love Mateus in the old days. That's when I didn't know anything about any kind of wine at all.
We thought we were stepping up with Boone's Farm, when I was growing up. But you taught me to like red wine, and
I told you back then?
Yeah, you did.
Oh, wow. What year was that?
1981.
81. Well, yeah, I was into wine by then.
Yeah. Okay. So what's this quarantine like in your life, in your world? This is a bizarre time.
Well, it's bizarre for the whole world. That's what makes it bizarre for me. I've never been through anything like this,
right.
Where you're afraid to go out. I mean, I've never, and I think that the federal government is out to get me. I'm not sure what to do when I go out. I'm not. Should I go to a doctor's office? Should I, if I break my leg, should I go to the hospital? I mean, what the hell is going on? I can't figure it out. I don't know when we're going to find out what's the right thing to do, because we're not getting it from the federal government, obviously.
Right.
I'm not, as far as being in the house, Dana and I have been house people for a long time. I've been all my life, since I stopped being a journalist and started being a full-time writer. That's most of the time I spend home.
That's what I was going to say. I've talked to a lot of writers that say this is no different. We're
no news for me to stay home and work at the typewriter, the computer. I used to do it at Dove Street. I used to do it over our friend Rudy Tarson's house on Crooked Lake, and I did it here. I have offices all over the house. I now have taken over the dining room here. So that's what's happening.
Does it remind you at all, obviously you lived through World War II. Does it remind you at all of Pearl Harbor and that?
It did for a while, when the whole world was worrying about this, and suddenly, you felt like that there was danger everywhere, and you didn't know where it was coming from. But World War II was never like this. I mean, World War II, you didn't have to stay in the house.
Right.
I mean, you ran out of meat, you ran out of butter and eggs and whatnot, but and if you knew the grocer, you got favored treatment once in a while. But World War II was not, personally threatening you, and that's the way it's threatening everybody in this country. I mean, people in Kansas and meatpacking plants, those poor people that have to work, and Trump has got people, mandatory work in a place that'll probably kill you.
Right.
I mean, it's insane what's going on here at the highest level of this government, and that he doesn't care about human life anymore. human life has taken a back seat to the almighty dollar, and that's the way it is, and that's the way it's been from the beginning. And now everybody is seeing it, but it's proceeding.
Right.
And it's like, the country is beginning to accept this. It's very, very strange. And of course, there was never anything like that. And, every death in a foreign country, in Japan or Okinawa or the Battle of the Bulge, or, it was the liberation of Paris. I mean, how many people got killed? Every death was sacrosanct, and now death doesn't mean anything.
Right.
People are dying all over the place. I mean, 3,000, 4,000 people died today in I don't know, in this country or in this. I can't even keep track because I don't know whether it's New York's totals. New York's totals are just horrendous.
I know New York State, 25,000, the country over 70,000. But what do you think? I started watching the press briefings, Trump in the Rose Garden, and it just got so bizarre. It seemed like
I couldn't. I had to turn them off. I couldn't. But I watched them. I watched that one where he talked about ingesting.
Yes, drinking Lysol. Yeah.
Lysol or some kind of disinfectant, and going out in the sun and having ultraviolet light, be injected in somehow into your system. That's what he wanted to do because it works on the skin apparently. So, I mean, I thought this was insane, and I thought the country is going to just turn around, go inside out, because he is saying this right now.
Right.
And it was a very, very casual response, And finally, everybody got, it's now just, but it's a point of mockery, and that doesn't take away from the fact how insane that is.
Right.
To suggest that. I mean, it's so ridiculous, and the fact that he's just cast all the scientists aside, it's. I mean, I feel that there's a flaw in our democracy that has not prepared us for this condition.
Right.
That the founding fathers screwed up in not being able to find a counterweight for this heavy, heavy burden of ignorance and maliciousness that's coming out of the federal government. I mean, he's now just dispensing with all careful guidance on to how to open up the country again. And what's going to happen is thousands and thousands of more people are going to die.
Right.
And there's no counterweight for this to happen in our time. I mean, in anybody's time. I don't. I'm sure there were other presidents that people felt like I feel about Trump, that you just want to get rid of him.
Yeah.
Get him out of here.
But the hubris and arrogance, he goes into the face mask manufacturing place and refuses to wear a face mask, refuses to wear one at his press briefing when his own CDC is issuing that guidance. He's,
Well, that's just his solipsism, the fact that he's the only one who matters in the world.
Right.
It's not, he's not thinking about anybody else. The solipsist is the rest of the world doesn't exist except as it interferes or interacts with you.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what he is. I mean, it's so obvious, and it has been from the beginning, but it has been from the beginning of this furious pandemic.
Right.
And that he's not really taken a lead. He's not trying to save the world from death. he's trying to save the world from economic hardship. And that to me is insane.
Right.
I mean, death comes first. I mean, that's number one. And
Right.
economic hardship is, yeah. I mean, but you know, they weren't shooting people or poisoning people or sending viruses out to get anybody in the 30s. I mean, you survived. They weren't after you the way I feel that he's after me.
Right.
I'm an old guy now, you know, and I'm 92 years old, and I got heart problems. I got prostate problems. I've had cancer here or there. You know, I got some lung problems. I was a heavy smoker. You know, I got it all. I'm one heavy duty target.
Yeah, he wants to sacrifice. I'm going to be 61, and I'm almost in that demographic, but he's in that age too, and he's not taking precautions. But let's. You know,
He
Trump
doesn't.
always takes
He doesn't believe he's vulnerable
I know he is.
because it's only what he understands about himself. That is. You know, I read a piece in the New York Review of Books, and I didn't even finish it, but it's a brilliant piece by Fintan O'Toole about Trump and why he is doing this, why he is downplaying the death of all of these, you know, Black people, Hispanic people, first line people on the. He considers them all losers. It's a brilliant analysis by Fintan O'Toole, who's one of the most brilliant journalists in the world.
Right.
And I just think that this is, you know, something that probably should be sent around to everybody who can read. And
I mean, his racism
should understand what Fintan is saying about this guy.
Right. When he. Yeah, when Trump mentioned the shithole countries, Africa and Haiti, and I mean, it's clearly racist and dog whistle.
Oh well, yeah, but we know that's beyond it. I mean, that's just part of it. That's just the racist business, the xenophobic business, you know, the pro-Nazi business. You know, everything he does is just one parcel of this insanity that and you know, his home remedies of you know, ingesting insecticide.
Right.
You know,
Let's
what are you
compare
going
him
to do?
to
Where the hell are the founding fathers when we need them? You know?
I know. I was going to ask, in your lifetime, who's your favorite president? I have a guess, but how would that president handle this situation? Who is your favorite president in your lifetime?
In my lifetime,
yeah.
I guess, you know, I thought the world of Bill Clinton for a lot of reasons, and then you know, Jack Kennedy, of course, was you know, fantastic president, and I mean, he brought such verve and intelligence and something we hadn't had in so long to that office. And, you know, I love that. But I remember FDR. I remember those fireside chats. I remember sitting in front of the radio listening to the fireside chats. I was, what, 5 years old, 6 years, 7 years old?
Right.
And he was a great man. I cried. I was parking my car in my garage when I got the news that he died. And I broke into tears. Right? You know, I didn't expect to do. I didn't expect that.
Right.
Why am I crying at the president? Well, because I loved him, and I just thought the world of him, and I just worshipped what he did and how he did it, and how he cared for the world and the people.
Right. He managed.
I liked LBJ too, because he got a lot of things done.
Yeah. Let's
He's a
compare
wacko guy, but I don't like him a lot.
our own governor, Andrew Cuomo, has shown some solid leadership in this crisis.
Andrew's wonderful. Andrew's, you know, I think Andrew's a possible candidate for president right now. I mean, and I don't think there's any doubt about that.
He keeps saying, do you believe him when he says, I only want to do this job? I wouldn't even consider it. I mean, he's a politician. I don't know
well, I don't believe him when he says that. I think if they asked him nicely,
yeah,
I think he'd say yes. But they asked his father very nicely,
right,
and he said no.
Right.
So I don't know if Andrew is really trying to walk in his father's shoes in that sense, but I hope not.
Right.
I mean, I think he'd be fine. I think he'd be a big improvement. We know that on whatever there is there now. And but so would Joe Biden.
I know.
Joe Biden's a great guy. I mean, I just think the world of Joe Biden.
Yeah, but I
Joe
think
Biden, by the way, I must say, he likes Roscoe, my novel.
Nice.
Somebody got a quote from him once. So
yeah,
Joe is on my list, but he's just such a decent guy and such a smart guy. You know, he's nowhere near the articulate person that either Bill Clinton or Jack Kennedy or FDR was,
or Obama. Yeah,
but neither was Harry Truman at the beginning. But I saw Joe Biden's couple of speeches that he's given in fairly recent time, and I thought he came through just fine. You know, and I think he's a very capable man, and he's got a basic intelligence, and he's the closest thing to the ordinary guy. Right. Becoming president that we've had probably in a long time,
right?
And that's great. I mean, that you get a smart, ordinary guy who maybe isn't, academically articulate, but who cares?
Yeah,
I mean,
I thought
Dwight Eisenhower couldn't put together a coherent sentence, but he was a terrific guy, and he was a good president, and he was a great general and a wonderful human being.
Right.
So we had a great Republican in power for a while when Ike was president.
Let's talk about the one parallel, the 1918 influenza pandemic. I wrote a story, looked at the impact locally, and it hit hard. I mean, hundreds, they didn't have an exact count, but at least 500 people died in Albany, at least that many in Schenectady. It kind of tore through the GE plants. But your own grandfather succumbed to that, right? Can you talk about your grandfather?
Yeah, I always heard that he died in the flu epidemic, but I have his wallet, and it has in it. It's got a wonderful very few things. I mean, I don't want to. People threw out papers and books and histories and everything, and from the old houses where my ancestors lived. Yeah. And I was left with a paucity of remnants. But one of the remnants was my grandfather's wallet. And it has in it a little notebook. I mean, it's really worth studying. And it has Dr. Cronin, who came to see my grandfather, who died when he was like 42.
What was his name?
His name was Peter McDonald, and he was the father of my mother and my uncle Pete, who was Billy Phelan,
right,
and my Aunt Catherine, my Aunt Key. And that was there were two other children who died, and his wife was Annie Carroll, and she came from Main Street in North Albany, and her father was Big Jim Carroll, who was the leader of politics in the North End in the 19th century for a while, and he used to throw potatoes across the table at people he didn't agree with. But he was this was a wonderful guy, and I just don't know hardly anything about him, and I can't get anything more. I don't know what to do about him. And my parents never talked. My mother, my aunt, well, they did. They talked about him once in a while. I have a few things. I mean, he was an engineer on the railroad. I got his picture.
Yep.
I got a picture of the engine 151, which is apparently some kind of a station, you know, an in-house kind of engine up that somewhere used to be up in West Albany. I don't know, but he was a well-dressed guy when he was an engineer on the railroad, and you know, Swifty Meade. You remember Swifty Meade?
No,
Swifty Meade used to run Swift's Tavern across the street from the railroad station on Broadway in downtown Albany. It was Billy Phelan's turf. And it was the first thing you saw when you came out of the railroad station into Albany to get a taxi or something if you got off a train. And there, right across the street was Swifty Meade's saloon. And Swifty was a great guy. His real name was Harold Simpson, and he was a boxer. But anyway, wonderful. I got so much stuff from Swifty about my grandfather that I never got from anybody else. But he used to say he was always a well-dressed guy. I mean, and you look at him in the picture I have, and he's very neat, tidy. He's got some kind of a coveralls or something on him, but he was really good, and he was really a straight guy. And I got a couple of postcards, and he was a very witty guy. So you know. And so, I mean, he imparted his wit to both my mother and my aunt, and then especially to my Uncle Pete. Oh, but anyway, he got the virus, whatever it was, in 1916. And when was the thing? It was 1918.
The first wave was 1918 in the summer, and then a second wave was late fall in 1918. The final wave that killed the last people was 1919.
When did it start? When's the first time it started?
Early summer 1918.
1918. Yeah. Well, he had it might be something like the fact that they're now discovering that our coronavirus started in Europe, not in China, or at least that it came from Europe to us and not from China to us.
Right.
But anyway, that he might have had it in a kind of non-demonstrative way, but he had it in the late 16 and he had it through 1917 and 1918 was when it happened, right? Yeah. And he died in January 1918. Yeah. Now that's presumably before the virus, but you know, he died of pneumonia. He died of like everybody dies of. So he probably had it, and they said he had it. So yeah. But the thing is, Dr. Cronin used to come to the house sometimes twice a day, and it cost $1 a visit. And my grandmother kept notations, or Peter kept notations. I probably think it was my grandmother though who did it. And there it is in the book. And then it came out to like, for a lot of $1 a visit, he came like 34 times, and wow. And then there was 34 visits. And then he came another 34 times. And I mean, it was like $75, $100 $108. I don't know exactly what the number was.
That's a lot of money in that.
Yeah, it was a
Yeah.
fantastic amount of money that people were making $5-6 a week and things like that, you know. And anyway, so what this was a phenomenon of the age, that in the way that this sort of thing was treated.
Right.
I mean, the doctor would come to the house twice a day. I mean, not every day, no, not every day, but you know, very often.
Yeah.
And anyway, there's the receipt, you know, in the book also, that she paid on certain everything. She paid it off after he died. You know,
Yeah.
I don't know how long it took her, but she paid everything off. But
have you tried to use your grandfather in a novel?
I'm going to try to use him. Yeah, I want to use that decade,
Yeah.
that decade from 1911 and 12 on up through through his death. No, he's not really a character in the novel. But I'll find a way to use his experience, and I think
I'm
he's
happy to hear you're making some progress on a new novel. Can you talk about it? It's
yeah, I can't really, I don't want to go into any significant detail because it's a mess. But I'm trying, you know, I feel like I'm just starting out.
but it's going to cover a lot of history, it sounds like.
Well, yeah, I've had an ambitious program for myself to write that. I was back in 1964, 65. I maybe 66. I don't know. One of those 60s. I decided I was going to write a doorstop of a novel and start with somewhere with Henry Hudson or something like that, and come up through the, you know, encounter with the Indians and the Algonquins and the Mohicans, and then on into Jefferson and who knows, Jackson.
That's very ambitious.
Lincoln, yeah, you know, Melville, you know, maybe Melville, maybe give him a walk on, and Henry James. I already got Henry and Henry Sr. in one of my novels, but it was an absurd book. It was too much, and you know, I really, it just fell away as an idea, but I never lost the idea of some kind of a panoramic history of Albany,
Right.
and because there were so many things that happened, like the canal, building the canal, and the railroads, and how they started here, and became so significant here, and so, you know, and all the wealth that was here, and the fact that we were a hub for rail and canals and rivers and you know, stagecoaches. You know, we were the way west,
Right.
and it was a very important city,
Right.
and it could have been, you know, like a major significant city in the country, but things fell apart the way they're falling apart now.
But it was a
at the
top 10
federal level
for a period. It was one of the top 10 cities in the mid 19th century. But let me talk about Quinn's book. That's a book on the canal, and you cover the cholera epidemic in that book. What do you recall from the research you did? That hit Albany pretty hard in the 1830s and 1840s, I know.
Yes, we were hit hard here. there was a lot of cholera around Albany and elsewhere. I mean, and cities were going crazy, just the same as we're going crazy now. It was like this. That was comparable, except it was crazier. But because we were burning tar in the middle of the city, all over the place, they were trying to purify the air by burning tar, by polluting the air. And they didn't know what to do. They didn't understand that the water was the problem at that point, you know, so they didn't have any. It's the same with, we don't know what the cause of the virus is.
Right.
But they didn't know what the cholera was. But there was the poorhouse, that was up near where I went to school, CBA, up in Medical Heights now, where behind the law school, behind the pharmacy colleges, where the old CBA grounds were. That's where I went to school.
Yep.
And there was was the Albany poorhouse, or whatever it was called, the asylum. And I have a scene in there at one point where my main character, Bailey, who was a newspaper columnist, and he goes back in time, and he winds up going into a meeting where they're discussing this, and he just attacks them and tells them to get their act together and clean up. But but I did portray what was happening, and it was horrendous. What people were dying in front of you, right. People collapsing, and they were, and you couldn't predict it. It's the same. It's very similar to what's happening now. I did in Quinn's book, and I had somebody, particularly dying on a front stoop, just suddenly struck. And then there's I'm living out here on Burden Lake Road, and I remember Jack McEnany talking about this. That when I was writing the book, I talked to Jack, and he was he said, we used to the Irish used to move out there during the cholera time. I never knew that. I never heard that. But I believe it. It's the way people came out of New York to come up to Albany,
right,
or come up to the Adirondacks, or wherever the hell they could come up to. That wasn't New York,
right,
because they couldn't get away from it in Albany.
It's kind of like the tuberculosis. They went to Saranac Lake, the Adirondacks, for the fresh air. Any idea to get out of the cities?
Well, that proved to be pretty healthy,
right.
to do that,
right.
and that's very different. But that's really therapeutic. I mean, this was escape. This was where the cholera was not.
Right.
So, and people started to have their summers out here, because I guess the summers were the worst time. And this is the way the lakes built up out here. This whole lake district, Burden Lake and Crooked Lake and Glass Lake and Reichert's Lake and Crystal Lake and Snyder's Lake. I mean, there's so many lakes out here that are just marvelous places, and they were just waiting to be inhabited, and they were inhabited. That's
and the water was clean. I mean, cholera is a drinking water issue. Water, and I can remember, Albany, when it was drawing its water from the Hudson, always had the Albany throat or the Albany cough. So I think that the poor quality of water in the city was always an issue. And another thing that I read that they suspect when you had pigs roaming freely around the city and
Oh
definitely
yeah, oh
everywhere.
yeah, right. That's right. There were, I have that in there.
Right.
I have my columnist yelling at them. Why don't you pen up your pigs and clean up the streets? What's the matter with you? You're stupid. You worry about punishment from God. God doesn't even know you have pigs in the street, but if he did, he would punish you more.
Right.
Anyway, I mean, it was a primitive understanding of knowledge of this horrendous mystery.
Right.
It's awful. I mean, I haven't really read enough about the plague, the bubonic plague.
I haven't either, so
I'm going to
I
go
have
back and read.
Have you read
read about
Camus?
that.
You've read Camus' The Plague? I have not, and I need.
Oh, you read? Yeah, years ago. Yeah, I like that a lot, and I was very moved. But it's a metaphorical story, but it's horrendous in its facade.
Right.
The facade of the story is. It's anyway.
Is there any novel that you want to reread or return to during this pandemic?
I'm rereading Faulkner.
Yeah.
I'm going back to Faulkner's short stories, which I always feel comfortable when I immerse myself in those stories. I'm going back to him. I mean, he's such a brilliant, inventive mind,
Right.
and there's like nothing else we ever had. Melville maybe, but
Yeah, I
Melville
mean, I
was
finally
of a different
finished
order.
Moby Dick last summer, and it was. I'm so glad I finally went back to it because I had abandoned it a few times. But I know you also, and I do as well. Joyce, he's at the top of the list. But how do you rank Joyce and Faulkner if you had to pick them 1 and 2?
Oh, everybody asks me that. Why do I have to pick one
No, you don't.
over the other?
1A and 1B.
No, I think they're both brilliant men who are, not like at all like one another. Joyce was such an academic mind in a certain way, and his knowledge of languages and his use of language. But Faulkner was this mind that just roamed randomly in the universe with an immense amount of language.
Right.
I don't know where he got all his language. I mean, Shakespeare. He read a lot of Shakespeare. I know that, and he was a reader of poetry, but he was a great Shakespeare reader, and he read the Bible and he read Melville.
Right.
But he was a Faulkner had this kind of impromptu imagination that was different from Joyce. Was methodical, and he was organized, and he had patterns, structures that he followed very clearly. I don't think Faulkner ever wrote that way. I think Faulkner was just like he just turned his brain on and sat down and picked up the pencil and then followed what his brain was telling him.
Yeah.
And I'm sure that he was that he just had episodes of writing that never stopped. I think when you listen to Faulkner at the university, those marvelous recordings of
Right.
him talking to to various classes and groups of people, and they're all asking him questions constantly about everything, and he has wonderful answers and funny, and he repeats himself a lot, but why not?
Yeah.
I mean, that's the way it is. I mean, we know a couple of things in this life, and that's what we keep talking about.
Right.
And Faulkner was so magnetic when he spoke about these things. But you could see that that it was a kind of mind that just never stopped, and once it got on the road, it just kept going. And I think that when there's one place where he talks about how many hours he spent writing some section of either was Absalom, or it was Sound and the Fury. I'm not sure. One of those two, I think it was.
Right.
But those were two of his great Compson family books. They were marvelous books.
Yeah.
Just like nothing else.
So
He was a great man, and not only that, he was a nice guy. I liked him. He liked to drink. I remember he was, when he went out to Hollywood, and he was writing some movie scripts, and it was raining one night, and he ran out of bourbon. And he went to the guy next door who was also a screenwriter. I don't know who, I can't remember who it was, but it's in one of his interviews. I think it was in the interview. But he knocked on the door and he said, "Can I borrow a bottle of bourbon?" And the guy said, "Gee, Bill, I'm sorry, I don't have any bourbon." He said, "I got some scotch I can give you." And Faulkner said, "Between scotch and nothing, I'll take scotch."
Yeah, nice.
There's the Faulkner, it's a great man.
Yeah, I mean that language just flows. Incredible, incredible.
Like nothing else. Like
So
nothing
different
else.
though, because I saw when my wife and I were in Dublin. It had to be 10 years ago now or something. They had this incredible exhibit of Ulysses at the National Library, and it took up a whole room. And they tried to kind of document and chart how he put that incredible novel together, and they actually recreated his kind of crowded room. And he was a clipper and a cataloger and a researcher. I mean, he had reams and reams of material. It just felt like he was swimming with information, and then he would kind of transform it on the page. I didn't feel Faulkner wrote that way. He didn't do that.
No, that's right. That's all I was saying.
Yeah.
But that's all right. I mean, that's the way I followed Joyce. I mean,
You do a lot of research.
I felt that kind of research was absolutely, when he was writing Ulysses, he wrote back to people in Dublin. He was living in Paris or Trieste, wherever he was living. And he said, send me who lived on this street next to, Davy Byrne's saloon, who was on 7 Eccles Street, not 9 Eccles Street, and where the Blooms lived. I mean, it was a fanatical with him. He was. He needed all of that information, but that's to me that that thing that I just wrote for Stanford was there was something about that in there that it has to do with the idea of research.
Right.
Research is somehow a dirty word, for some novelists. And they don't want to be caught dead doing any research, as if it was something that was shameful. But to me, as a newspaper man, I come out of the facts,
Right.
And I'm not trying to substitute my research for imagination. I'm trying to get it straight.
Right.
I'm trying to get what's going on in any condition, situation, place, or individual mind with accuracy. And that's the point. The point is to be accurate. And, I was raised as a journalist to be accurate
Right.
and to be voluminous. I remember Bello when I saw Bello when I took a class with him in Puerto Rico when he came down there, and I gave him my book and he read it and he liked it, and so he took me on as a student. I was one of 10 students, but he said one of the things he said in the course of our conversations. We all met individually with him in the faculty club at the University of Puerto Rico at Rio Piedras, and he said, "You have to be you have to be expansive. You have to be prodigal, because it only takes one sperm to create a life, but how many sperm are expended in the course of an event?"
Right.
And that was really a remarkable thing for me to hear.
Right.
And I've been prodigal ever since.
Right.
And I mean, it goes to everything I touch. I mean, I also learned it from a guy named Sam Halper, and I was a Time correspondent in Puerto Rico, and he came down to do a cover story on the governor of Puerto Rico, Luis Munoz Marin, and we worked together for about 3 weeks putting together the cover story. And I don't know, I never worked so hard or so crazily in my life. And whenever I turn something in, he said, "This is nothing. Give me some information. This is 15 pages. This is 20 pages. I want 50."
Right.
50 pages. What you're insane. Yeah, he was insane, but he was a good guy. And together we produced 70,000 words.
Wow.
That's the size of The Great Gatsby.
Yeah.
That was the size of our text that we sent up to New York, and they produced about I don't know, 2,700 words or something like that.
Wow.
For the cover story.
Yeah.
And
felt
but that was saturation reporting, and I learned it from Sam, and I never forgot it, and I behaved that way forever after. I was a maniac accumulator, and I'm still. I mean, I just got. I overwhelm myself. I mean, I get too much information, and I have to. There's a point where I have to stop and say, "You're stupid, Kennedy. You're stultifying yourself." And so I have to go back and then just at least try to reevaluate the information.
Yeah.
Sometimes that works. Sometimes it doesn't.
I can tell. I agree that more reporting, more research will yield a better story, because you'll be able to just pick the absolute nuggets of gold out of it. And if you do 2 interviews, the story's going to seem a little thin. You've only got 2 voices. If you do 10 interviews, it'll be great. If you do 20, find the one quote from 20 people is much better than having 2 people say something over and over and over. So I always felt the same way. And I would always work right up to the deadline, and one more call, one more knock on the door,
Absolutely.
one more, you never know what that last call could be, the thing that just makes it a great story,
Right.
But I want to talk too about the play version of Ironweed. It's had some really good developments, and now this coronavirus, like, if everything is kind of put it on pause. But can you talk about where that is at? I know you've had workshop productions. I saw one off Broadway at the Atlantic Theater, which was fantastic. But can you talk about where that is at?
Well, I'm not sure. I thought maybe I'd get to talk to my director, who is a woman named Jody Markell, and she and I wrote the script together. And Brad Gilbert called me the other day, and everything is on hold as
Right.
always, as everything is. But we were scheduled to go into some kind of a workshop in New York on May 18th.
Right.
And we have Mark Ruffalo, who's now hanging out in downstate New York.
Right.
And he's ready to go in, and I don't know what's going to happen. I don't think anybody's going to go in May 18th. That's what 13 days from now.
Yeah.
What is today? The 7th?
Let me check. The days run together. Yeah, it is the 7th.
11 days
the
away.
same. Yeah, 11 days.
Yeah, I don't know what Mark is going to do, and I don't know what I'm going to do. I mean, I'm in no rush to go down to do a workshop in New York City.
Right.
But anyway, I just feel like, you wait your life to get a play going to Broadway, and then suddenly, it seems like impossible.
Right.
I mean, there's so many people's lives are curtailed like this. I mean, I'm not complaining. I'm not whining. I'm not. I know. I'm ready to postpone. I've postponed everything my whole life long. I mean, postponement is a way of getting around the fact that it's not happening.
But that workshop or the staged reading with Ruffalo and Jessica Hecht was beautiful. Is she still on board?
Well, everybody's, yeah, she's around. Jessica's a wonderful actress, and she's so, and she and Mark work together a lot of times, and they're both ready for this, and we'll do something. I don't know when the theater again becomes possible, will become possible. I think it's ready. I think that the script is there. We've done it. We've done it over and over and over again. We've made it. We've proved how good it is, or what we think how good it is, and other people think how good it is. So what more can you say?
Right.
You're ready to go, and are we gonna go? No, we're not gonna go. We're gonna do something else.
Right.
So, but we'll be there one of these days.
How about that Stanford project? Again, coronavirus. It was going to be a live event with Tobias Wolff and talking to you. It's a program where they take a great American novel from living and dead writers, and they chose Billy Phelan's Greatest Game. That had been talked about as a film many times. I know you did several versions of the script. How many people wanted to make Billy Phelan, and is any of that still possible?
Yeah, it's possible. It's always been possible. It was the one book that everybody felt was a ready-made movie.
Right.
I didn't write it that way. Anybody thinks that I did is feeble-minded. But it's a crazy novel. It has two points of view: a newspaper man and a young guy who's a pool hustler, and he gets caught in a political trap, and he's what they call marked lousy in Albany, and he can't even get a drink at one of his favorite bars, or he can't play pool, or he can't play cards. I mean, he's a card player. He's a gambler. He does everything. He does it well.
Right.
But but Billy was a ready-made movie, and I wrote it right away. It was optioned right away as soon as it came out. It was a real good story. And there was something wrong with the way I was writing it for a long time. I've done a lot of screenwriting, I've done, Cotton Club, I did Ironweed, but I did Billy Phelan right from the beginning. I did 4 or 5 scripts before that. None of them worked, but I learned, and I felt that this was a movie that could work. And I wrote a couple of scripts, and then it didn't work. And then a couple of years, 10 years maybe passed, and I suddenly got another idea, and I wrote another bunch of scripts, and it didn't work. And then about 2 years ago, something, maybe 3, I don't know, I finished whatever I was doing, and I said, I'm going to go back to Billy, because I always believed that Billy was, that script was just, it needed some kind of manipulation to make it right. And I think I've made it right. I rewrote it. And what I did was I sort of rewrote it as fiction before I wrote, to make sure it was right with the book.
Mm-hmm.
I sort of rewrote it as fiction with, I blocked out everything just the same way I would write a chapter of Billy. But it changed the last third, I would say, of the story. And it made it far more cinematic. And it did not cater to any kind of cliche of the action movie or anything like that, which when I was working on the previous versions with them, they all more or less wanted to,
Right.
but there were too many directors to deal with, and they wanted to have a shoot 'em up, or one guy said Billy should strap on his guns and at the end of the book and end of the movie and go out like John Wayne and solve everything.
Right.
But that's well, Billy goes, but he has no guns.
Right.
Anyway, I rewrote it, and I think it's pretty good. I think it's really good. I think it's a first-rate kind of screenplay, and so did a lot of other people. I've shown it around to a lot of people who are. Fred Roos is handling it. Francis Coppola's director.
Yeah.
Fred handled it way back when for me, and we never could get it off the ground. But Fred's a wonderful guy and a terrific producer. And he knows actors, and he's a brilliant guy.
Who were the actors that wanted to be Billy over the years? Wasn't it
Mickey Rourke was
Mickey
the first
Rourke?
one. Yeah.
Ed
Well,
Burns?
Francis might have directed it, but I don't think so. Francis was going to direct Legs, but he was never going to direct Billy.
Yeah.
But then he was, I had a lot of people. Ethan Hawke would have been nice. He came up here. We played pool. I can't remember all the actors. There were dozens of actors when it seemed like we were going to. I wanted Brian Dennehy to play Martin Doherty.
Yeah.
And we lost Brian last week.
That was sad.
He was so fantastic in my play, Grandview.
I saw that at Cap Rep. I remember seeing him. He's a great actor.
He was a great actor. There was no question about it. I saw him Inherit the Wind. He did so many things. he was marvelous.
Wasn't
But he
was
was fantastic in Grandview, where he
right,
plays Patsy McCall and Dan O'Connell.
right,
And he personified him. He even looked like him, you know.
right. Didn't Dennehy induct you or something? You both got the Irish American Society Award in New York.
Yeah, we both got the Irish Americans Writers and Artists Award, the O'Neill Award, and I got the award first. And then they asked me to write about him, and I wrote an essay about him. I haven't found that lately. I'm going to go find it up on my upstairs computer, but it was a good piece, and it was a short piece, but it was telling about what kind of an actor he was, and
Yeah.
he was he was a wonderful actor, and but like a lot of people in the world, they get old,
Mm,
and
yeah.
the body fails you, and
Yeah. How about any movies you've watched during this? A lot of people are watching a lot more movies. I've been watching a lot of foreign films. There's this tremendous Spanish film called Platform, which I would recommend. It's on Netflix.
I don't know about
It,
that.
it's it's amazing and original and disturbing and but I've
Well,
been
whose
I'm trying to
movie?
remember the director. I can't remember the name, but it takes place in kind of a nihilistic world, and it's very apropos for this pandemic because people have been imprisoned on this giant prison with 300 levels, and each day from the top level this gourmet meal comes descending, and the people are ravenous eating it. Instead of eating a little bit and sharing it with all the lower levels, they don't, and then it turns into this chaotic, I mean, it's a metaphor of Darwinian survival, and it's this very dark, kind of Trumpian world where it's being controlled by some evil person. But anyway, I would highly recommend that. It's a stunning movie. The most original thing I've seen since Parasite, which I thought was also a brilliant movie.
Well, what country does the director come from? Do you know?
It's Spanish. It's in with
Spanish.
subtitles. I can look it up real quick.
Don't. I'll find it.
Have you watched anything recently that you like?
Oh yeah, yeah. I mean, I just saw That's Dancing,
What is
which is
that?
I put it on for Dana, my wife, and you know, I saw a little bit of it. But this afternoon I watched. Last night I watched People Will Talk.
Huh.
It was Cary Grant and Gene Crane and Hume Cronin and Sig Ruman, and it's about a doctor who's accused of being a quack, and he's just an unusual doctor. And Cary Grant plays it very well. It was written by Joe Mankiewicz, who was
Yeah.
one of the great screenwriter directors of Hollywood for
Yeah.
30s and 40s and 50s. And his brother was Herman Mankiewicz, who wrote Citizen Kane with Wells, and was a buddy of Ben Hecht out of Chicago. And anyway, it was a good movie. I loved it.
Did you find that on Turner Classics, or where did you?
Yeah,
find it?
I got about 150 movies on Turner Classics that I go back to, and but I've seen two or three really. I watched The Seventh Seal the other night.
Yeah.
I didn't see it all, but I almost know it by heart. But I watched it for a long time. It's a wonderful movie. I just bought all of Bergman's movies, 39 movies he made, and I've got them all there. So discs, and so I can see them anytime. But this one was on Turner Classic Movies, so I was able to tape it. And I love to see a bunch of Buñuel movies right now.
Right.
I don't know how many I got, but I think I'm going to go collect them and start looking at them.
You're going to go on a Buñuel
I just need
binge.
a Buñuel fix, you know.
Binge watching, they call it.
There's just something about that man. I mean, he did Belle de Jour and Viridiana, two of the great movies of all time, and Nazarene, and so many others. He's just a fantastic movie maker.
Right.
Oh, I found the Chien Andalou. I have a tape, videotape of. He's a great man.
You have something that can play that still? I don't have a VHS.
I have, yes, I have.
So what do you miss most about it? I miss, obviously, all of our Writers Institute events. I miss our dinners with our writers, which are such a wonderful opportunity. I miss that we had to postpone the film festival. I mean, we're going to do it next spring. It's going to be amazing. I worry about the book festival. You know, we have the date, September 12th. We're starting to...
Yeah, it doesn't sound like it's going to be ready.
We might not be able to do it in person, but what do you miss most? You're a sociable person. I mean, being locked in is
yeah, I miss hanging out, you know. I mean, drinking alone is no fun.
Yeah. And restaurants, all you can get is takeout.
I want to go over and see Jimmy Rua. Right. I want to go to Jack's, and I want to go to 677. You know, these places where you not only get great food and great drink, but you also have a great festive kind of atmosphere.
Right.
Where it's a pleasure to eat and drink.
Right.
I don't know what's going to do with the Writers Institute. I'm so sad.
I know.
Greg Boyers.
Yeah.
All those great people that we meet every summer up there.
Right.
Frank Bedard, Russell Banks.
Right. Yeah, I worry about a lot of arts organizations, if they're going to survive and come back after this. I worry about restaurants, bookstores. So we're helping the Writers Institute and WAMC. We're doing interviews like this with authors with new books, and then we're directing people to go buy directly from Susan Novotny at Bookhouse or Northshire Bookstore up in Saratoga, or Open Door Bookstore in Schenectady. The independents have fought through Barnes and Noble.
They're all good bookstores. They're all great. You know, I've been going to Susan Novotny. We've been dealing with her since we began the Writers Institute. Wonderful bookstore, and she's just holding on always by her fingertips. You know, and she has what's the bookstore at Troy?
Yeah, Market Block Books.
Market Block, yeah. Well, anyway, did we exhaust?
We've had a great. We may be running out of tape. Did we run out of red wine? Yeah.
No, I have. I've seen to that. We've not run out
a little bit more, but I think we've had a great conversation. We've covered a lot of. I think we've covered every pandemic, and I think we set the tone that hopefully we'll have a big change in November on Pennsylvania Avenue.
Well, if we don't, the country is in for a bad time.
Yeah, but this has been wonderful, Bill. Next time we'll do it in person. I look forward to coming out and seeing you or meeting in one of our favorite restaurants soon. I hope it's not too long.
Okay, Paul, it was fun, and I'm waiting desperately for the return of the Writers Institute.
Yes.
I mean, so is everybody. I mean, that's a great thing to have in this town. And I mean, it's something to do when you go out. That's substantial. You
Yeah.
know?
So we've got a virtual Writers Institute for now, and thanks for being part of the
That's
conversation.
right, and it's great. There's so many of these conversations, and
I want to remind people the William Kennedy Endowment Fund, which we started on your 90th birthday, and we raised a good amount of money. We hope that people will want to contribute because that's a open fund. People are still adding to it, and we hope this and other things, people will remember that the Writers Institute does need help and support, and we hope people will give to the William Kennedy Endowment Fund.